Thank you for joining me on the journey. This is Completed Christianity. So, continuing on with proof that the dietary laws were not changed in Scripture. Today, we're going to take a look at Romans 14. And in Romans 14, this has been called the freedom chapter. Erroneously so. And we're going to see why that is right now. So here we go. The Spirit distinctly says that in latter times some shall fall away from the belief, paying attention to misleading spirits, teaching as demons, speaking lies and hypocrisy, having been branded on their own conscience, forbidding to marry, saying to abstain from foods which the Mighty One created to be received with thanksgiving by those who believe and know the truth. So, scholars, they use this and point, and pastors are taught this in seminaries, Bible colleges, that this abstain from foods at least, that's pointing back to the Jews, to the law, that you're supposed to abstain from certain foods. But these foods were created, like pork, they say these foods are created to be received with thanksgiving by those who believe and know the truth. But this is not so. So this whole passage here is speaking about religion in general, pagan religion, that does all of these things, as well as what claims to be non-pagan religion, but has actually brought in pagan ideals that they intermingle and cover up and pretend like they're not pagan, or that they've been sanctified or Christianized, or whatever the word you want to use is. So this passage here, it's about religion in particular, and saying to abstain from foods is real big in many pagan religions, and it bled over into Catholicism from pagan religions as they brought in pagan ideals, and it's a big Gnostic belief that you deny your body the things that are pleasurable, like meat. Meat is a big food that religiously has been abstained from, to say that this is matter. This is matter that is created, and it is evil, and that we should not partake of this particular matter. Yeah, some things you have to eat to live, but this type of matter, particularly like meat, it's a pleasure, it's a delicacy. It's something that we shouldn't have, or we shouldn't have all the time. We definitely shouldn't have meat actually all the time. We should have days where we fast from meat, and possibly even seasons of the year where we fast from meat. But that's another thing. So this is not referring to Judaism. It's not referring to the law of Moses or anything like that. It's not referring to the dietary laws at all. It is religion, pagan religion, that forbids these things. Forbidding to marry, it's not a Jewish thing to forbid to marry, but it was part of the pagan priesthood, where they forbid to marry for their clergy. But then what is food that is created to be received with thanksgiving by those who believe and know the truth? Well, apparently, since we believe that this is talking about eating pork and other such things, that we don't know the truth. Christianity, it doesn't know the truth, because these things are completely established by the Father, pre-established, that these things are not okay. And we're going to prove that. Okay, let's read on. So, created to be received with thanksgiving by those who believe and know the truth, because every creature of the Mighty One is good, and none is to be rejected if it's received with thanksgiving. We'll see. There we go. Every creature is good. Nothing's to be refused as long as it's received with thanksgiving. Okay? Well, there's a problem with that. Because it goes on. And it says, for it is set apart by the word of the Mighty One. Like in the King James it says, sanctified by the word. So, where does the word set apart certain foods? Okay? Where does it set apart? You know, you can't put pork on your table and pray for it and it's clean. All the toxins don't go away. And modern preparation and modern feeding doesn't make it clean. It doesn't make it okay. So, where is it that it says that it's set apart by the word? Well, it says so in the Torah, in the Father's law. I mean, we talk like the Father's law is something that's evil. It's His law. It's His ways. We're against Him when we don't follow His ways and follow His instruction, which is what Torah means. It doesn't actually mean law, it means instruction. But when you add a penalty to it, then it becomes a law. But it's actually supposed to be an instruction. You're supposed to take these instructions, but because people won't be instructed, then there has to be a penalty, thus it becomes a law. So, when we move over to Romans 14, Romans is a book that is extremely fascinating. And when we get to Romans 14, which has been termed as the freedom chapter, this chapter is not about what it's made out to be. The intent of the writer is completely different than the way most scholars interpret this book today. So first off, who is the book of Romans written to? Well, let's look at the text. So, to all who are in Rome, okay, comma, to all who are in Rome, beloved of Elohim, beloved of the Mighty One, called, set apart. So this is who it's to. It's for all those who are, of the information we get so far, people in Rome that are beloved of the Mighty One, called and set apart. Then, in chapter 2, he says, see, you are called a Yehudi, or Jew. So, the people in Rome that are beloved of the Mighty One, called and set apart, they're Jews. And they rest on the Torah, the law, and make their boast in the Mighty One, and know the desire of the Mighty One, and approve what is superior, being instructed out of the law, out of the Torah, and trusting that you yourselves are a guide to the blind and a light to those who are in darkness. So, these are Jews who are in Rome that he writes to. And so these are people who they understand the terminology. They understand the first century Hebrew culture. They understand what is trying to be communicated to them. So let's look at Romans 14. And we'll start with verse 5, because this is just kind of like one of the key verses that everybody goes to, in particular for another reason, such as to say that the Sabbath isn't valid, that we don't keep it, or if you can or you can't, or if you do, you can choose any day to be your Sabbath, and stuff like that. And this is the passage that said to do that. So let's take a look at it. One, indeed, judges one day above another. Another judges every day alike. Let each one be completely persuaded in his own mind. He who minds the day minds it to Yahweh, and he who does not mind the day to Yahweh, he does not mind it. He who eats to Yahweh, for he gives. He who eats to Yahweh, for he gives the Mighty One thanks. And he who does not eat to Yahweh, he does not eat, and he gives the Mighty One thanks. So, let each one be completely persuaded in his own mind. Okay, so then that's taught like this as the freedom chapter. So just whether you keep a Sabbath or you don't, just be, persuaded in your own mind. And whether you eat things clean or unclean, just be persuaded in your own mind. That's all that matters, because that's what it says right here. Well, one, the Sabbath is not the context, and eating clean and unclean meat is also not the context. So if we back up to verse 1, we back up here to get the context. And receive him who is weak in the belief, not criticizing his thoughts. One indeed believes to eat all food, but he who is weak eats only vegetables. He that eats, let him not despise him who does not eat, and he that does not eat, let him not judge him who eats, for the Mighty One received him. So here we have the crux of the matter. Here we have the context. Okay, one believes to eat all, but he who is weak eats only vegetables. So how do we go from clean or unclean to vegetables? See, we're not talking about clean and unclean. It says, he that eats, let him not despise those who do eat, and that does not eat, let him judge him who eats, for Elohim received him. So we're talking about eating or not eating. When you're not eating, what are you doing? Fasting. This was a big debate in the first century as the believers in Messiah came along. This debate ensued, and it was over what days of the week to fast. And so there's no Torah command on when you fast. So when you fast, you can fast any day. Okay, right back here. Fasting, one judges one day above another. Okay, because it was taught by the Pharisees and by the circumcision party that you fast on these days. Okay, so they judged those days above another. Okay, but those who believe in Messiah, they judge every day alike, because there's no Torah command. But the command from the Pharisees was a rabbinical command, a rabbinical law. And the teaching, such as in the teaching of other religious systems today, that the tradition that's handed down, that tradition, that it's just as valid as the actual law. In this case, they have the law of Moses, and then they have the rabbinical enactments, what are called takanim, or takanot, and so the takanot, these rabbinical enactments, they are elevated to the same stature or even beyond that of what the law is. And so if you're not keeping those, then you're not keeping the law. And that's the way it gets portrayed, that Moses gave this oral law and a written law, and if you're not keeping the oral law, which is the same thing as the rabbinical enactments as it carried along, then you're not keeping Moses, and therefore you're in sin and rebellion to the Father. So, one indeed, fasting, different days of the week. One indeed judges one day above another. Another judges every day alike. Let each one be completely persuaded in his own mind. So There's no Torah law, so you just be persuaded on which day in your own mind, which days that you think you ought to fast. He who minds the day to fast or to not to fast, minds it to the Father, and he who does not mind the day to the Father, he does not mind it. He who eats to the Father, he gives thanks, and he who does not eat to the Father, he does not eat, and gives the Mighty One thanks. So, this is what we're talking about. It has nothing to do with Sabbath. It has nothing to do with clean or unclean. This whole chapter, it's talking about which day to eat or not eat. Okay? And clean and unclean is just not part of the equation. There was no debate in the first century. There's no documents, no written anything about a debate on that these things all of a sudden became clean. And the Father, in His Word, He says that He doesn't do a thing unless He first reveals it to His prophets. And there was never any prophecy that it would go away. And there's never an actual intent by the apostles that these things were changed. And so this particular passage right here is from the Dietary. Dietary means teachings. It's the Dietary of the apostles to the heathen. And so it's the teaching of the apostles. This is a first century document. And this is what it says in the Dietary about the same thing that we're talking about in Romans 14. This was the same debate, the same thing going on. And let not your fastings be with the hypocrites. The hypocrites were the Pharisees, the circumcision party that did not follow Messiah. That they were the hypocrites, just like Messiah said. He called them all hypocrites because they say and they do not do. So that's a hypocrite. So let not your fasting be with the hypocrites, for they fast on the 2nd and 5th day of the week. Okay? Which, to clean that up, that's Monday and Thursday as we know it. But we shouldn't have those in our vocabulary. So, and even back in this day, it wasn't part of the vocabulary. It's the 2nd and 5th day of the week that the hypocrites fast. But do you keep your fast on the 4th and on the preparation? On the preparation day. So, preparation for what? Preparation for the Sabbath. So this is a first century, what's known as a Christian document. And it says that it's on the preparation. They were still keeping the Shabbat. They were still keeping the Sabbath. And if you look at this in a Catholic translation, they get rid of on the preparation and just put 6th day because they don't want that known that there was still an emphasis toward the Sabbath on what we know as Saturday. So right here we see this, a document from the first century, and it's detailing this debate and that what the days were. Okay? So we move on in Romans, and he says, I know and am persuaded in the Master Yeshua that none at all is common of itself. So in the King James, this says, none at all is unclean of itself. So right there, there's none that's unclean. So pork's clean, lobster's clean, shrimp's clean, all that's clean now. And so we can just eat it all. It doesn't matter anymore. Well, there's been a little bit of tomfoolery with this verse as well. And so none at all is common of itself, as it said here, which is the better translation, and we're going to look at that. So let's read on. None at all is common of itself, but to him who regards whatever to be common, to him it is common. So we'll stop right there. Okay, each of these words, common, are the same word, and it's koinos, which is where the manuscripts that we have of the New Testament in Greek, they're written in what's called Koine Greek, which is common Greek, which is what this word is. It's the word common, and such is how it's translated here, common of itself. So I'm persuaded that none at all is common of itself. And it's not talking about the meat in this verse. He's still talking about this day or that day, which day is set apart, for you to fast, and that he's saying that, that none at all is common of itself, but it's common if you think it's common. Okay, so because every day is the day that the Master is made. Every day is a good day, so that none of them are common. But if you regard the day to be common, then it's common. If you elevate another day, then to you it's elevated. It's set apart for that day, if that's the day that inside you. But you can't say to another that, hey, this is my day, so this has to be your day, or you're in sin because you're not following my day. Then you're adding to the Torah. So koinos, in the Strong's definition, this means common. And where we have it say clean, unholy, this is unclean, unholy. This is like definitions that are added later on. Like we have words now that they mean something different to us now than they meant a few generations ago. And so, typically, in a lot of cases, on these Strong's definitions, when you get to these that are toward the end, they're kind of like what it evolved, what it came to be, because that's the way we translated it. So, down below here in the translation count for the King James, this word's translated common 7 times and unclean 3 times. So common is the common understanding of this word. And when we go on here, we're going to see it used here in Scripture, and we're going to see it used, how it's used, how the thought was of it then, in a very telling way for our subject matter. But Kevin said, not at all, Master, because I've never eaten whatever is common or unclean. So, common or unclean. So, here are the words in Greek. So, anything that is common or unclean, down the left side here, and then you have the pas koinos and akathartos. So, koinos, akathartos. So, akathartos is the word that's actually unclean. That's the word for unclean, not koinos. That's the word for common. So he uses it, common koinos, unclean akathartos. So, akathartos, it is foul, or unclean, impure, morally lewd. And that word is used 28 times versus the other words used 3 times to mean unclean. And so that's how we have this, scriptural gymnastics, translative gymnastics. It's just tomfoolery. So here it is in the King James, nothing unclean of itself. So this word here, unclean, it better translated as it is here in the Scriptures 2009 edition from the ISR, which is the Institute for Scriptural Research. So none at all is common of itself. But to him who regards whatever to be common, to him it is common. And if your brother is grieved because of your food, you are no longer walking in love. Oh, see, right there, if you're telling your brother he can't eat pork and he's grieved, then you're no longer walking in love, and do not by your food, ruin the one whom Messiah died. So just right there, we just cancel the law of the Father in one broad stroke, or is something else going on? Yeah, something else is going on here. And once again, it goes right back to the time of fasting. When to eat, when to not eat. If your brother is grieved because you're eating on this day, and your brother doesn't believe that you should eat on that day, then for your brother's sake, don't eat on that day. Or don't let him know that you're eating on that day. Because if your weaker brother, your brother who's not fully understanding the faith, he's still stuck in religious tradition, don't do those things that are going to cause him to stumble. Don't eat don't eat in front of your brother the days that your brother thinks you shouldn't eat, so as to not ruin your brother for whom Messiah died, because your brother is trying to learn this new way, because in these days they had learned Judaism, they had learned oral traditions, and so Messiah and the apostles come along and say, "Oh no, those oral traditions, those are bad. You do all that in vain, and by doing so, you profane the word of the Father. You cancel the word of the Father by doing those things. So do not by your food ruin the one for whom he died." So your brother's trying to catch on here. So don't show him things that are going to make him think, oh, well, these people, they're not following the rabbis. They're fasting on these other days, and this isn't right, so I'm out. And so you ruined your brother because you had to eat on your day and prove you're right. Well, help your brother along. Romans 14:20, do not destroy the work of Elohim for the sake of food. All indeed are clean, but to evil that man who eats so as to cause stumbling. You'll see, all is clean. Once again, we go back that clean and unclean is not the context, it is not the content, it is not the intent of this passage. Do not destroy the work of the mighty one for the sake of food. When you eat it, when you don't eat it. And then he even's fixing to bring in that the food could be sacrificed to idols too. And then what do you do with that? So again, it's clean food that could be sacrificed to idols. What do you do with that? So indeed all are clean, but evil to that man who eats so as to cause stumbling. So if you're eating and it's going to cause stumbling on the day that your brother doesn't believe you should eat, then it's evil, because verse 21, it's not good to eat meat or drink wine nor do whatever by which your brother stumbles. Do you have belief? Do you believe that you can eat on second and fifth day? Do you believe you can eat on second and fifth day? Well, if you have that belief, have it to yourself before the mighty one. Don't cause your brother to stumble. Now, everybody's heard of this verse. 1 Peter 1:6. Now this word holy is not a good word to use. It's there's several reasons why this word is not a good word to use. This is not a word that's in any original manuscript. It's just our handed down, watered down English word, and the reason it's not good, the one reason we're going to cover here, one reason is because it's not specific. It's abstract. So what is holy? What does it mean? Yeah, you can't really tell me. Oh, it's doing the right thing. Well, what's the right thing? Oh, well, it's it's doing good. Okay, well, what's good? See, it comes down to different people's interpretation, but there has to be a standard. There has to be a standard to follow. So this is not a good word. And we're going to take a look at a better word, or a better understanding, which is going to be set apart, which is what when the word holy is used in the what we call Old Testament, that word in Hebrew is kadosh, and it means set apart, a separation. Well, the Greek word used for holy means the same thing, to have a separation. Well, a separation from what? Well, in the Father's Word, He tells us what to be separate from, and who to be separated to, and who to be separated for. He tells us. So 1 Peter 1:15, back up to 14. As obedient children, not conforming yourselves to the former lusts and ignorance, instead, as the one who called you is set apart. So you also should become set apart in all behavior, because it is written, be set apart, for I am set apart. It's written, be set apart, for I am set apart. So, where is that written at? What does that mean? And if you're a first century Hebrew, when you see this, be set apart, for I am set apart, well, then you understand some things. You have a different mindset. You're getting some different definitions going on in your brain when you see that. You're having different word pictures than what a 21st century Christian has when you say, be set apart, for I am set apart. Because to a 21st century Christian, that doesn't really mean anything either. But if we go back to the Word, if we go back to what the Father says, then we figure out what be set apart means. So, He's saying, the one who called you is set apart, so you also should become set apart in all behavior. For it is written, be set apart, for I am set apart. Well, as a method of interpretation, we have what is called the law of first mention. And a lot of people lean on this. And the law of first mention means that when something is first mentioned, that sets the tone of how it is used the rest of the time in Scripture. That sets the definition of what it means, what it refers to, what it relates to. So, there's only one other place in Scripture where you find this, be set apart, for I am set apart. So that one place is the only place that Peter's talking about. Be set apart, for I have been set apart. For I have been set apart. But he's relating it also into all your behavior. So it means a particular thing, but then he says in all your behavior. So when we go back and we take a look at this, be set apart, for I am set apart, there's only one place we find that, and it's Leviticus 11, where we find the dietary laws, where it says, do not eat all these things and abominate yourself. These are an abomination to Yahweh. So, these things that you don't eat, they're an abomination. So, how do we go from 1 minute at a point in history that it's an abomination to, oh, it's fine. Didn't know y'all didn't like not eating that pork stuff, so, hey, I'm sorry. Is that what the Father's really saying to us? Oh, sorry, didn't know y'all didn't like not eating that stuff, so, hey, go ahead. I made a mistake. No, we made the mistake. We made the mistake because we listened to hundreds of years of people who interpreted it from a faulty foundation, who interpreted it not from the foundation of the intent in which the scripture was written, but from their own intent, from their own understanding, from their own culture, and we went awry. So, Leviticus 44, for I am Yahweh your Elohim, who sets you apart. And you shall be set apart, for I am set apart, and do not defile yourselves with any swarming creature, the one creeping on the earth. For I am Yahweh, who's bringing you up out of the land of Egypt, Mitzrayim, to be your mighty one. And you shall be set apart, for I am set apart. So, what's the first way to be set apart? First way to be set apart is to not be eating things that the Father says is unclean. Not to be eating things that the Father says is an abomination. Psalm 89:34. My covenant I will not break, nor alter the word that has gone out of my lips. If you like the video, give us a thumbs up. Comments of opposition are welcome below. Comments of any kind are welcome below. If you have a comment of opposition, please don't say anything dumb like we're not under the law, we're under grace, because you've been taught to use that verse outside of the bounds of its intended context. Subscribe now. Hit the subscribe button down below. Ring the bell. If you can't find it, head over to our channel page. Ring the bell so that you get notifications of all new videos.